Okay, cool. What's up, everyone? So I think that there was I think that I made a little bit of an error on when the actual 1 year anniversary of Demand Gen Live is. So we went back to my calendar in 2020 and looked, and so the actual the actual 1 year anniversary would be on Tuesday, March 30th, I believe, of this year. And so the goal there, again, like if you want to submit your story, success stories, things like that, we'd love to have a couple of people on for that event to share them. I'm going to do my best to try and get Gaetano back for a little bit of a nostalgic appearance, which I think will be really fun. And so just wanted to throw that out there. If you have a story, success story about something that you got the information, you did something with it, you'd like to share it with other people live on the podcast, please send an email to DGL, Demand Gen Live, DGL at refinelabs.com. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get to the agenda. I'm going to go back to the out of order method here. And I'm going to start with the concept of stacking growth. And then there's a sub bullet here, running experiments to identify new growth levers. But the first point, and I just want to close this, sorry. I think the first point is really important about stacking growth levers and moving forward that way. In the idea, I'll give you a really clear example of the way that we have been stacking growth at Refine Labs, right? And then we'll go into some of the experiments, and then I'll talk about some of the like pitfalls or things where I see some companies miss on this. And so we had one employee. It was me. I was writing posts on LinkedIn. That was the first stack of growth. We got that thing going. It started to work. People were enjoying the post. The people that we were trying to communicate with were engaging and receptive to the information. And then we stacked a new addition to the channel called video. So text and then video in the channel. And then from there, we started to build live events. But the main reason that we did the live events was to get the video to put it on LinkedIn, but we also got the event in it. You can see how these are all interrelated as I go through. They're all tying back to the same outcomes, not necessarily the same channels. Events feed the video inside of LinkedIn. Events went away. And so then we moved to a live Zoom format that was similar to a live physical event. And that was working well. And then we moved that into a podcast. And so you can see LinkedIn, text, video, events, live Zooms, podcasts, but they're all written in like the same line of thought, and they're all feeding the same things in just like extension areas. Now, some of the things where I see companies miss on this is that they try and do too many things at once, and they stop doing the things that were already working. Right. And so if I went, I'll give you an example, and this is real life. People do this. LinkedIn text posts are working. LinkedIn video is working. But now we're going to go to live Zoom and podcast, and we're going to stop doing LinkedIn. And so you need to, and it's about introducing different things at the right times when you are organizationally ready. You don't need to be doing a million things. You need to be just doing one additional thing really well and making sure that it works and having a process so that you continue to deliver growth through that exact execution. And so we cannot, when we're doing these, we cannot lose sight of the things that are already working. And so what'll happen is you'll have a core engine running. Let's just pretend that the company has a really good SEO strategy, for lack of a better idea of where to go with this. So they have a really good SEO strategy, and then they decide that conversion rate optimization is the next growth lever. And so what they do there is they start to spend all their time trying to like fix all of the existing SEO pages to make them better for conversion. So they start putting forms and different things in there, and then the bounce rate goes up, and then they lose the SEO rankings and the whole thing falls apart, right? So that's just an example of how this can go sideways. And it sort of got into the idea about when is the right time to introduce a new experiment? How do you choose what that experiment is? And how do you control the system so that the things that are already working keep running, and you introduce one new idea and you see if it's going to work? And if it works, you figure out how to move that into your mix. And then once it's properly moved into your mix and things are running, then you think about what the next thing is going to be. And so that's the overall process. I think it's a really logical way to look at it. It's honestly the way that we do it with companies. At first, we would try and do all the channels at once. We would try and launch paid Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. This is me back in the day. Would try and launch all those at once. And then what would happen over time is that I would start to move to Google ads. And then the next thing I would do is I would start to figure out Facebook. And then once Facebook was figured out, which will take months, would then start to move on to LinkedIn, and then would start to think about YouTube. So you need to have a process for how you're going to approach these channels so that you're actually deep in the channel and you know what it can deliver for you. And so there's basically two ways to think about the experiments when you set them up. It's either new channel or new execution inside of an existing channel. And so we'll go through two separate examples, some that we do with our customers. And so we have a cadence with a customer. Google Ads is doing pretty well. And now we're moving into Facebook while Google Ads collects data. And so we're starting to move into Facebook. We have a core playbook mix where we're going to do product marketing, social proof case studies, a mix of PR, and a mix of problem awareness blogs. That's the mix that we go into it with. We start to ramp the channel up. We're tweaking the mix. We're figuring out. We get that mix optimized to $80,000 a month. And now we're trying to figure out, should we move to LinkedIn or should we try and do more inside of Facebook? And so we're going to go through the example inside of Facebook. The next thing that I would think about doing is, how do we take one part of that execution and just do it a little bit better? And so let's pick product marketing. We have the entire mix running. We're not going to stop doing the product marketing that we were already doing. We're going to keep the entire system stable, but then we're going to introduce a new campaign that's going to include a high production value product explainer video, not like the whiteboard explainer, like something that's actually good, right? And then you introduce that video inside of the channel. When it's formatted, you have a format for Instagram stories, you have a format for feed, and you run that through. And then you measure the incremental impact of adding that to the mix. And let's say that it works. Let's say that that part of the mix dramatically overperforms everything else that you were doing. Then you need to figure out, how am I going to be able to create enough of these videos to fill this channel at a rate? So I'm going to have to be able to lower the cost while maintaining the quality and the effectiveness, so that I can put a new video in here every 2 to 4 weeks, so that it keeps delivering the extra impact. So it's part, does it work? And then the second part is, how do we get this into a repeatable process that we can continue to deliver on it to feed the channel? So that's an example on Facebook. Now let's look at a completely new channel. Let's say their entire paid mix is great, and now they want to open up a thing that we're doing right now, live Zoom to podcast with their CIO as the host, and then the CIO would be the host of the podcast. And that, so this is the new part of the execution. It's a big lift to get this going, right? And so you can't have marketing resources being pulled so that they're not spending time on LinkedIn and content and all those things, so that those channels fall apart. So you need to have a system where this is the exact thing that you're doing. And then you need to figure out as quickly as possible, what is the cadence? How is it going to work? How are we going to get people here? How many repeat people come? How are we going to promote it? How are we going to build a subscriber growth loop inside of the podcast? And so those are some different examples, but I think the take home, if I'm trying to summarize here, is not changing too many things at once and being okay with not doing too many things at once. It doesn't take that, like, we don't do that much stuff here, and we've been able to have a very effective growth path, I would say significantly faster than some companies that raise a lot of money, a fast growth path with not, I mean, we're on here at 740. So it's all relative, but not like a dramatic amount of effort or resources to support the things that we're doing. And so I'm trying to help, especially companies that have a lot of resources, to think deeply about, how do you pick one or two things and do them super well? And so I'll pause there. And again, we've been going off of this. The survey data tells me that I should continue on the agenda, but I would like to see if there's any questions on this.
Yeah, actually, Anna specifically was curious if you can talk a little bit about how, just in the examples that you're giving, especially about Refine Labs, can you talk about how you think about leveraging the website as part of the mix and making sure people are getting the right info when they land there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think we've made 4 total iterations on the website over the past 2 years since we've been in business. And those have not been like we changed the homepages, they've been complete overhauls, right? Because our ICP was changing, our product offering was changing, our messaging was changing. And so when we had enough data to know that we needed to move in a different direction, we would just go through and change the whole thing. Now, our feeling on, at least maybe I can't speak for everyone at the company, but my feeling on our website is that people pass through our website to convert, right? And so while a lot of companies spend a ton of time trying to put a bunch of content on their website, I spend a bunch of time putting content in places where people already are, so to get them to 99% of the way done, and then they just go to the website to book a meeting. And so I think the thought process around what a website is, what I think a website is and what it should be for us versus what a SaaS company that's 50 million ARR might think is quite a bit different. And so that's in general the way that we think about it. It's somebody that gets to our website already knows who we are and what we believe in. That's our goal. And if they already know us and they already know what we believe in, then our hope is that on a homepage and then maybe 1 or 2 interior pages, we've done enough of a good job explaining our value proposition, our differentiation, how we work, our pricing, all those different things, that they feel good to start a sales conversation. And so for us, it's like that, just getting it over the goal line, so to speak. And so I'm not sure that's the answer that you would expect, Anna, and would be happy to answer a follow-up if you were hoping that I took that in a different direction.
No, I just find it really fascinating because I've also been thinking like the website is almost like either a conversion point or like for your business, right? Or for similar businesses, or a double check almost. Like people just kind of want to double check. Is this a legit business? And let me just check that everything is in its proper place. And, you know, so I've also been thinking that way, but it's very different from how people use websites today.
Yeah. And the reason that they use websites differently is because they're not getting enough of the stuff accomplished outside of the website, right? And so when they go back and they see in Google Analytics that someone visited 17 pages before they converted, like, we don't need that, because the person already knows everything that would be in those 17 pages before they get to the website. And so it's just a different look at things. I personally believe that it would be a lot more effective for companies to change their mindset around that, because when you put content only on your website, your objective is to get people onto the site rather than just delivering it where they already are. And when you deliver it where they already are, it sort of changes what you do. It changes your objective. It changes your measurement. And it honestly in my experience, makes it better if you execute effectively.
Really quick follow-up question.
Yeah, of course.
The website, though, it's your owned stuff, right? And so when I think about channels that you don't own, there's a risk, right? If you're relying on LinkedIn, if you're relying on Facebook, if you're relying on YouTube, you're relying on channels that are not owned, and you're not, relying on your owned channels as much, and making sure that there's like 100 website pages. I'm just making this up, but yeah, you're not building that out. It's a risk. So that's what some folks might say. What do you think?
I consider our LinkedIn page an owned media channel, right? Like, I get that like LinkedIn technically owns it, but it's our channel, right? Like, we decide what goes on there. We decide what messaging, we decide what the button says and what link it goes to. And so when I hear the argument about the owned thing, the argument is usually, well, you don't own your email list for your 60,000 LinkedIn followers. And I over here have this email database of 60,000 people, so I'm better. And that's the argument that I usually get. And I'm like, okay, like that's fine. Because the amount of engagement, attention, overall effectiveness between a LinkedIn channel that's working versus an email list of 60,000 people that maybe you bought on Zoom Info, or maybe you ever collected over the past 10 years in your CRM, and most of the people don't even have active emails anymore or whatever. It's just like, I don't believe the argument for the email capture. My feeling is that it was created from MarTech vendors that create email automation platforms. Like, and so because you take the brand value with you, right? Like if somebody's email, if they change companies and their email is no longer valid, you don't own that either. It's about the impact that you make on the person when they're listening to you, that impacts the brand and the affinity and the relevance that they feel to you. And I'm not over here trying to capture someone's email address. I'm creating information so that they want it. Like, I would rather have someone go out of their way to listen to my podcast than shove them into a form so I can send them emails they don't want. And so it's a little bit of a different way to think about it. But that's how I see it.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Why don't we squeeze in another question from
yeah.
Robert? Robert, I'll bring you on to ask your pricing question.
Sure. Hey.
Hey, good to see you, man.
You too. Yeah, thanks for doing this, as always.
Of course.
So what question around our pricing page? We've taken a few cracks at it and we haven't seemed to nail it. So it's fully transparent. We list our pricing, but it's complex and based off of customer feedback, people and prospect feedback, they land on the wrong number a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we have these internal discussions around, I guess I would be curious at your opinion. Would you more quickly experiment with like a hybrid version of driving towards meeting, but giving ranges, changing pricing, and maybe even some product and branding stuff, which is a lot, deeper than just repackaging a page, or just, keep chugging away at trying to find something that is clear and simple?
Yeah. So the first thing that came to mind, because this comes up a lot, I get this a lot. Oh, we can't publish our pricing because there's such a huge range and there's all these different things and we need people to figure it out. And then you go on and you look at Salesforce's pricing page and it's a fucking mess, like, because it's so complicated. And so the first thought that I had is perhaps the pricing needs to be more simple, right? Like perhaps this is a more fundamental issue. Like the question is, why is the pricing so complex that you can't communicate it effectively inside of a web page? Would be the first place that I went to, which might actually be a huge benefit to explore that. Because if you explore that, you find out a simpler way to do it. It's on in the page. You might be able to lift ASPs just by communicating it more. There's a lot of other things inside of it to review how you do pricing that would be really helpful. I am 100% open that this is not my area of expertise on like figuring out pricing. So I'd redirect you to some of ProfitWell's content, because I think they are really strong at the science behind it. But whenever I get this question, and I get it from a lot of professional services organizations, our pricing is it's all custom and too complex. And I'm like, why? Right? Like, so I would challenge you to think about if there's an easier way to have one core value metric in a couple different offerings, potentially like a normal SaaS. I don't know your product well enough to really make a recommendation here, but that would be the first thing that came to mind for me.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah,
like,
I guess
and I'll give you an example for us, right? Like, we've made a lot of conscious choices about who our exact customer is. There are an abundance of companies out there that are looking for something like what we do and would never pay the price that we charge. But for the customers that we are specifically targeting, I believe that we're dramatically underpriced for what we do. Right. And so because we are so specific about who we target, then you could have a very unique product offering for that specific customer. We sell one product, you know what I mean? One very specific offering for that customer. And we've been able to increase pricing over time because of the value that's delivered, the brand impact, as well as the, unique offering that we deliver.
Gotcha. Yeah, that all makes a ton of sense. I think we'll have to simplify our pricing no matter what. I guess if there's
It's like a technical buyer, right?
Yeah, data science leaders and IT people. Yeah.
Which makes sense, because it would be interesting. This is a really, really interesting thing to look at. I would look back into history about how those prices originally got chosen. And I would guess that an engineer at your company might have put them together like a while ago.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but I've walked into companies where like the pricing got decided by like some random person.
That's not totally wrong. Our solutions engineering team has a big say at the table. I guess gut check. How would you respond to like a range of pricing on a pricing page? Like, we want to have a meeting with you, but typically a ballpark would be this, or are you like anti drive to meeting?
A range is a step in the right direction for almost every company, right? And so I think that the objective there from the buyer side is, I don't want to waste my time booking this meeting and getting your people to follow up with me and spend time there if there's no chance that I have this in my budget, or I'm not willing to spend this amount of money to solve this problem, right? And so I think it's a good signal on the buyer side. And from the company side, you would think that buyers would look at the pricing and be like, oh, I'll never be able to afford this, and not book a meeting. But unfortunately, that's actually not how it works. I've not, in my data, I haven't found that you disqualify out buyers that don't have the budget by putting a pricing page on.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
Cool.
We're on a roll. Our good friend Austin has a
nice. I was looking,
question.
I was like, he's got the mic ready. He better ask a question.
Yeah. So let's squeeze in another before we get back to the agenda. Austin,
the fern has returned.
Oh man, things looking great.
Yeah, it's, don't need to water it. Stays the same color year round. So let's, I want to chop it up really briefly with about intent data providers. Because we got a new VP of sales. We just got acquired in December. And so got a new sales leader, really hot on intent data. I won't name any specific vendor names just to make editing easier for you. But we're looking at 3 of them. All 3 claim to have big differentiation between each other. Their sausage is made very uniquely, but it's all, to me, it looks like the same thesis. They either buy, data from content syndicators and aggregators, or they are the content syndicator and aggregator, and they're reselling it to us into our CRM. And, this thesis that they publish this editorial content that supposedly gets consumed by subject matter experts and executive decision makers, and it magically moves them from this content into gated vendor content on the same site that then gets sold to us as red hot leads, or at least people with high intent. My instinct is like, this does not work. I don't know any decision makers that buy this way. Like, I have never worked for an executive that has been like, oh, I read this obscure blog for 3 months, and now I read their this gated white paper on the same blog, and now I want to buy their solution. So does this work? Is this something that we should really be considering? And what is the, we were lucky. We got good on the trade. We have to buy this for sales, but sales took all 200 grand of our useless trade shows in their budget. So it was a good trade.
So the question that I have is this really intent data, or is this content syndication, like pure content syndication? Because it feels more like content syndication than intent data. Like somebody goes to a thing, fills out a form as a person, and then you get that person pushed into your CRM for like $50, right? Or is it different?
Well, so we actually browse the people who are currently most interested that have aggregated some score based on their intent, right? So
the challenge is like, how does that? I don't believe. I'm hypothesizing here. I don't really know the answer.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't believe that people can sell at a person level that data without them filling out a form.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
And
they have to
so-
complete a profile and opt into all of their.
Are we
they have
talking
to
like
give away all their
review
permissions, right?
sites? Like just say the names, it'll make it easier for everyone.
Yeah. So some of the vendors. So one of the vendors is Zoom Info Intent. You got Tech Target. Another one is Bombora.
Yep.
And then, and some of those
Okay.
do aggregate from G2 and other, review sites, but.
Got it. So the experience that I've had with intent data is at the account level, not at the person level. And so it was interesting to me to hear the person level, which is why I went content syndication, because I wasn't sure that this was even feasible.
Yeah, I misspoke. They do recommend the account, and then you can drill down into who in that account is doing it. So, yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So like the one that I'm most familiar with, so I'll just talk through it at a high level here is 6 Sense, which has an intent data provider and does other stuff, right? And so a lot of our customers use it, and you basically get a level of some type of score based on your criteria and different things that you put into the system of like actual accounts. But then you need to have a system to push in the data of actual people that match your personas and to activate cold outbound. Like, is that really what you're going? It's really
it's all for cold outbound.
Yeah. And so that's it's weird that like these types, especially 6 Sense, but I think the other ABM providers are coming in. It's weird that they're considered in the ABM category, but it's mainly used to do outbound sales. Because that's the only way that I've tested 6 Sense in enough angles for marketing to feel like it's mainly a sales tool. You know what I mean? And so the idea of intent data, and I've gotten this feedback from people that actually use products like this, and I've said the exact same thing, is that if you are waiting for intent data, you're too late. Like a lot of people, you might be able to slide into a couple deals and win them, but most often you're too late and you're like vendor 4 in the running. And so should we get it for sales? Like if you have the budget and they need something to do and it gets you off of the MQL hamster wheel, like the number one reason why I say to give a sales dev team a tool like this is so that we can stop spending $50 on LinkedIn email addresses, right? And so that would be the main like type of use case that I recommend to keep sales having something to call on that might be better than like a content syndication or another kind of like shitty lead source. And then what you need to figure out on the marketing side is how do you get people way before they're at the level of intent.
Yes.
And so I feel like it fills a very specific purpose, but if your main go-to-market strategy is built around it, you are destined to lose. Got a follow-up?
No follow-ups.
Cool.
How do you follow that up?
Yeah, I've tested a lot of the providers that you mentioned for like marketing purposes at the account level. So you basically get a level of accounts, and then you can push that into Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, those types of platforms, and then you can run ads to the people, like the target personas inside of those accounts that you have tagged. And there's some efficiency there. Like, yeah, you might be able to get a couple leads at a lower cost than you would on all of your other leads. But generally, there's not enough scale for it to be a real effective program in my mind for like a velocity, maybe for like a super enterprise where you only need to close 3 deals a year for you to make your year. Like, yeah, maybe you should do that. But for companies that sell 30 to 100K deals that are velocity sales where you need volume, like the 6 Sense stuff or whatever intent data provider with account level is just, I haven't found in a lot of different experiments that it's going to get you there.
Sounds good. It is for enterprise, to give you context. Not that I'm trying to breathe life into this, but
Cool. Maybe we'll see you.
I'll test it. I'll let you know.
Yeah, please do. Like, I'm one person that ran several tests over the course of 12 months with a lot of different providers, but you might find something different than me, and I would love to hear if you did. Cool.
Thanks, Austin. Oh, Matt, late to the party. Nice of him to show up. We have a couple questions that were submitted in advance, Chris, but do you want to meander back to one of the agenda
Yeah,
items?
let's get back to it. We'll cover the cookies next.
All right.
And so for the listeners afterwards, the topic on the agenda is why the removal of third-party cookies gives strong marketers a huge advantage. And that's the way that I see it. I see a lot of people being sad that that the cookies are going away and they're going to have a little less tracking, and the algorithms that are running all of their ads aren't going to work. But what all of these algorithms and all of these cookies and things have done is created a lot of terrible marketing. Like, and the topic was spurred. I maybe there's a link that we can drop for people for the post that Tom Goodwin wrote, which is the thesis is that like all of these things have actually created systems where people feel like it's easy and therefore just like shove random stuff in it and let the algorithm do whatever with no creativity, and not a lot of like thought around who they're actually communicating with and what matters to them and those types of things. And so all of those people that have been doing all of those things and just letting like Facebook's algorithm just go and figure it out and essentially like spamming people through digital ads are going to run out of steam right now. Their conversions are going to go down. Their acquisition cost of leads, or if you're product led, of signups, is going to go through the roof. And then they're going to have to find out a new strategy. And it's going to take them, I would say it would take them years to take what they've been doing and move it to a strategy that's going to be effective in the new world. So the people that are already doing the things that are effective in the new world are going to be miles ahead of the people that haven't looked at figuring this stuff out. And so I consider it an advantage, and I made a comment about it as well, which is that like you don't need cookies, you don't need a huge tech stack, you don't need personalization to do marketing well. None of these things are necessary to communicate with your buyers a specific message that resonates with them, that compels them to take an action to do something better that involves your product. It's when you distill marketing to a very simple thing, that's essentially what it is. And so all of these tech and tools have created the facade that you need all of the stuff to do these things, but you don't. It's very clear that you don't need any of that stuff to communicate with your customers in a way that they want, that compels them to buy something, or compels them to consider you when they're ready to buy something like what you have. And so maybe it's a little bit of a short segment because I feel like the point is very, very clear. But maybe David has a couple questions. We can go a little bit deeper.
I don't really have a question, more an observation. Cookies are going to be going away. And I don't think we really know what's going to be the outcome of that. Some articles you can read suggest that it's just another way for Google to take a power grab, that they will be the only intermediary on this new notion of flocks, these aggregated pools of people who exhibit similar characteristics to yourself, who can be advertised to as if they were a group, but you don't know who the individuals within that group actually are. And Google holds the keys to that communication, essentially, which puts them in the driver's seat for
there are
a lot.
Yeah. To be very clear, Google is already in the driver's seat.
Well, yes.
And so whether like the people that are spending a ton of money running display ads and following those metrics are already completely lost. And if you look at search, they took away broad match. All of their ad reps are calling all of our customers and telling them to do all the stuff that we don't believe in, telling them to make the wrong decisions. We have experiments running that I know will fail, that are going to kill their performance on Google search for 4 to 8 weeks because they're pushing the algorithmic based bidding that gives Google all of the control in situations where even Google's specifications do not recommend that you use it. You should have 30 conversions per month per campaign to implement max conversions. And they're telling our customers to implement it when you have 3 conversions in a campaign. And that's going to happen? The algorithm's not going to have enough. It's going to pay huge cost per clicks. Your CPA is going to go through the roof, and you're going to get 1, 2, 3 demos, and you're going to spend way more money. And so I'm watching this happen, and I'm watching ad reps are salespeople. Like, if you really distill it, they're trying to sell you the products that Google wants them to sell you. And why does Google want them to sell them to you? Because there's a vested interest for Google. And so whether it's an ad rep coming over the top and fucking up our accounts, or whether it is the optimization scores and the recommendations that they put inside of the engine that gives you all of the wrong advice to waste a lot of money. Like, if you're not educated enough on how to use the platform, then you should either not use it or find someone that is, because you're going to get burned. And so whether it's any of the platforms have a lot of control. LinkedIn does the same thing. LinkedIn does the same thing with our customers. Their ad reps come in, they say, oh, like text ads are hot. Why are text ads hot? Because not enough people are buying them, and they have an ad placement and they want to make more money.
There's
And
a
so,
quota
like,
on text ads this month, did you know?
Yeah, I imagine so, because a bunch of our customers have asked about them. And what was it 3 months ago? It was conversation ads, just different placements so that they have new revenue streams coming through, that they push them as the hot new thing. And it's sad because a lot of our customers can't call bullshit on it. And so we run the experiments. We're running text ads right now. I'll be able to report back on whether or not it works. But when you look at the root, it's the ad platforms doing what's best for them and then driving it into their customers. And then they create metrics inside of the platform that help justify the spend. Right. So on LinkedIn conversation ads, they're going to tell you that you should offer someone a $50 gift card to sit on a demo, and then they're going to measure it on how many people filled out the form. And they never look inside of the CRM to know that all those people move immediately to close lost after they get their $50 gift card. And so I clearly have some backlash, because it's really impacting a couple of our accounts right now, with what the ad reps are doing to some of these accounts. So I would push people hard when you get a recommendation from someone like this to think about whether or not they have your business's vested interest in mind. That was a little bit of a rant, and it had nothing to do with your question, but I wanted to get it in there.
It's fine. I don't disagree with any of it. And I think it's a really good point to remember that when you're getting a phone call from Twitter or LinkedIn or Google or Facebook, any of those reps, those are sales reps, and they have quotas and they have numbers they're trying to drive. And you are the client who has the money that they need you to spend.
Mm-hmm. And then just be very clear, because the ad platforms have to do it, but MarTech vendors do the same thing. MarTech vendors build metrics into their platform, and then they tell you to optimize for that metric, whether or not it actually maps to your business. In the one ABM vendor that says the core metric that you need to measure for your ABM program is landing page engagement, and then tells you about all of the ways to just shove people onto your landing page so that you can get more engagement. What's the result? You have more engagement, so you can make more cold calls, and you could have just made the cold call on its own. So yeah, I have some of those things I just don't, I can see right through how those things are built. Again, like, it would go back, another example would be the email list. We continue to talk about how the email list is so important. When did it start? One of the marketing automation vendors made email lists be a good thing so that you could shove people through email nurtures. So building your email list was the important thing, so that you could run them through the automation, which then would justify you paying them $800 a month to do it. Cool.
Do you want me to go to a couple questions that
Let's do a couple questions. Yeah, I need to cool down a little bit.
Yeah. It looks like our folks that submitted in advance aren't on. So let me ask a couple on behalf of some folks. So Keegan Brown emailed in. He said that he's a really small marketing team, and their primary focus is organic. They want to continue to support that, but supplement with some paid. but they're not sure how to do it without wasting the spend. If the goal is awareness, how do we measure effectiveness? Easy enough to measure ROAS, but wouldn't CAC go up guaranteed? I don't know if that gives you enough context. I don't have him on the line. What do you think?
So it sort of goes into our organic or paid conversation, and there's a lot of different nuances in here. The first one is to understand what your company goals are. If your company goal is to have the lowest customer acquisition cost and grow at 5% or 10%, then you should just keep doing what you're doing. If your goal is to start moving from 40% year over year growth to 65% year over year growth, and at the moment you don't care if your CAC goes up by 30%, then you should probably execute paid, right? So it starts with your goals. And so once you move past the goals, we have customers that when we run through an analysis at the beginning, before we actually start to work with them, we do a month-long analysis and we look at all the different things. We have some customers that are 80 million ARR and have an advertising CAC of 1.3 months. And the reason why they have an advertising CAC of 1.3 months is because they don't spend a lot of money on ads, and they are 80 million ARR. So there's word of mouth in the market that's driving customers in. And they're getting 20 new customers a month through marketing. And you can it's really just a hope strategy. There's no predictability. There's no predictability that you'll be able to move that bar forward without doing something else. And so that's one component, right? And so, yes, if you want to go from acquiring 20 customers a year to 80, and you want it to happen this fiscal year, you're most likely gonna have to spend some money in order to make that happen, and your CAC is gonna go up. But if your CAC goes up from 1.3 months to 4.5, and that's acceptable for your business, which it should be for most, at least the ones that listen to this, then it's fine. So you should be able to calculate back. Somebody at your company should be able to tell you what your overall CAC target is, and then you can back into sales CAC, marketing CAC, and then divide marketing CAC into advertising CAC and figure out what's allowable there. But for major fast growing companies that are getting, 12x or more, 10, 12x or more multiples on valuations, they don't care if they have a 3-year CAC payback total CAC payback of 3 years, they're fine with. And so there's just some nuances there. And when we think about more specific to the question, maybe you could repeat the part on Facebook for me so I can get deeper into that one. It was how do we execute it? How do we track it?
It was, if the goal is awareness, how do we measure effectiveness? He makes a comment that it's easy enough to measure ROAS, but is asking if it's a guarantee that CAC would go up. I think he's worried that if organic is working and they've been doing that, is it a waste of money to add paid to the mix just for awareness building? I think is where he's getting at.
Yeah. So we'll just get on to the topic here, because the answer is always both, at least for the audience that listens to this podcast, right? Venture funded, high growth companies that are looking to grow faster, especially given what's going on in the world right now, where marketing's having more, needing to deliver a lot more revenue than they did in the last year. Honestly, what I see is 175% to 250% more than last year, which is a massive increase in what's happening. The budgets are also going up too. And so the thing on customer acquisition cost to consider is that you're looking at it in a very, very small window of what is my marketing customer acquisition cost. And what you need to look at is the overall company's cost of acquisition, because the expense that's happening that's going to be high is how much sales resources need to deliver on the number in order for your company to hit your goals, right? And so marketing delivered high intent leads through a website will have a dramatically lower customer acquisition cost than an outbound sales one, and a dramatically lower cost per qualified opportunity when executed properly. And so when you look at those two things together, and then you deliver more marketing high intent leads that have lower customer acquisition costs, that dilutes the overall sales one, and it can lower your company's total CAC. We did it with a company over 2020. Their company's overall CAC went down by 26%, and it was driven through a lot of marketing efficiencies. And so by looking at it more holistically as a business, you're not just like, oh, like I was spending $0 on ads and now I'm spending $1,000 a month, and so our customer acquisition cost is going to go up, as opposed to we were spending $0 on marketing and we got 4 customers last year, but now I'm going to spend $1,000 a month and we're going to get 20 customers, which is going to help the sales team hit their goals. And maybe we don't need to use that outsourced SDR team anymore that delivers 1 customer a year. And so there's just, I think looking at it holistically is a good recommendation there. And then when you think about both, what I wanted to cover in this topic is the balance between the two and how it changes as the company grows, mainly based on the maturity of your organic engine. And when I talk about organic engine, again, this is not about SEO. This is about organic content in a lot of different channels that people come to consume, that drives business outcomes. And so at the beginning, a lot of the companies that we work with have, I would consider it a pure organic SEO strategy and not a lot of long form organic or organic social that they have confidence is delivering results. That's usually when a company enters to us. And then on the paid side, they might be spending money or they might not be spending any money. And so the way that we balance it out is that at the beginning, you should spend more on paid, knowing that your CAC will elevate to levels that need to be acceptable for your business during that period of time, so that it creates impact and space, while your organic that might take 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 months to actually start delivering an outcome. And then you start to, as that grows, you start to rebalance. You might not need to use paid to cover awareness and top of funnel because your organic is doing that job. That should be that should really be the overall destination. And so you only need to sort social proof down, and then occasional thought leadership, potentially on LinkedIn video on the paid side. But the reason that you use paid is because you can get so narrow on who you're delivering the ads to that you get people that may never ever consume your organic content. And so if you had an organic engine running and you wanted to get really creative, you could build a true account-based strategy where you pick a company and then you are creating new assets every single week that are just going to that company on LinkedIn, to the thousands, the minimum audience. You need to have, maybe it's 5 companies or maybe it's just one that's a large one, to 1,000 employees at that company about something that can help them, assuming that one of those employees will forward it or pass it along to the person that actually makes a decision. And so you can always there's always, even into that level of granularity, there's some amount. And then the other thing that I want to mention if you spend money on paid, it's going to increase your CAC. If you look at it just in a marketing customer acquisition cost lens, marketing spends a lot of money. And a lot of the money is on people. And so if this paid spend, which could be a small portion of how much you spend on people, is able to increase the productivity and effectiveness of those people when getting new customers, then you can actually, again, blend down your customer acquisition costs by making everything that every person is doing slightly more productive at generating more customers. And so there's a lot of different angles to look at this, but just because you spend money on ads does not mean that your CAC is necessarily going to go up.
That question led right into the third agenda item. Quite nice.
Yeah, I think I covered it during that.
For that. I have another question from Stephanie, not on the line. She knows our good friend Sydney Waterfall. She wanted to get your take on something. Stephanie's been in marketing for a little over 11 years. She's worked on the agency and the client side for both B2B and B2C. Now at the point in her career where she's looking for looking for more, how that she can elevate her skills. Been following your content, Chris, for a while, loves the marketing, your marketing philosophy. It really resonates with her. And while there have been opportunities to leverage some of the concepts, she hasn't really been in a position to actually execute on a lot of the ideas in her roles. And she said a lot of her roles have also been heavier on strategy than execution. So all of that to say, she's looking for advice on how to build those skills and she says break into the space. But I think maybe just how she can, maybe things that she can do outside of her formal role to build that skill set.
I didn't catch it. What's the space she's trying to break into?
I think like she's
just trying to get more sound tactically, I think is what I got out of it.
Correct.
Yes. We have the perfect idea for you. You don't need to change jobs. You don't need to do anything. And you should build a consumer brand around a commodity product. Or if you want to spend time developing a product that's differentiated and not a commodity, then be my guest. But the easiest way to learn these skills is to just pick a commodity product, rebrand it, and then build an e-commerce engine that leverages organic social strategy, content strategy, creative messaging, figuring out how to build a website, figuring out how to fulfill orders, figuring out how to sell stuff on Amazon, figuring out how to run Amazon paid search ads, figuring out how to run a P&L, managing cost of goods sold and inventory and cash flow. Like building a mini business is the best way to learn everything about marketing, especially in a consumer commodity space, because marketing is what sells those products. And so that is the 100% clear recommendation and I did this several times as in my early mid 20s while still having a full-time job. Like you can definitely do both of these things and learn a bunch of stuff. And there's a ton of ways to do it. You can source the products on Alibaba and rebrand them direct from the manufacturer and bring them in and then sell them across, brand them, build a Shopify site, do all those things. And then if you want to, sell them on Amazon as well. And you might make them a little bit of money. I think we probably made 6 figures profit on the best year that we had. Like it's not life-changing amounts of money, but you might be able to make a little bit of money. But the ROI is on how much that you learn. And the takeaway that I'm not sure that I've directly communicated here is that when I did those things and I was doing marketing, I learned a ton. When I was trying to sell blankets on Shopify and Amazon, and I was able to, through Instagram, hard work, organic, and putting out content on Instagram about these blankets, was able to build an audience of 5,000 people, drive sales directly from Instagram, work with influencers, figure out how to put content out every day, figure out how to measure it, right? And so and then what I did was all those things that I learned, I was then able to deploy on LinkedIn where it became very successful, right? But if I didn't do all those things, I wouldn't have understood the dynamics of a social platform. I wouldn't have understood how they worked. I wouldn't have understood how responding to comments and post times and consistency and how to create a post every day and how to write the copy and how much the copy matters. All those things that I learned there, I probably wouldn't have been as successful on LinkedIn as I have been, right? And so, and then the last thing is, if I learned a lot of the advertising components trying to sell these types of products. And when you're using your own money to run paid search ads, you quickly figure out whether or not the stuff's going to work and drive a result, because you feel it. Like when I spent $1,000 on Amazon search ads and it didn't work, and I lost $1,000 of my money, and I felt it. And now I do not make that mistake when our customers give us hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, right? And so by doing it yourself, you have with your own money, you have a different level of commitment to figuring out the channel and how it works. And so those are some like just literally raw takeaways from things that I did early on and how valuable they were to my being able to be where I am today.
I love that. We got some more questions coming in. I'm going to bring on, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Nishanth. Love the podcast. First time live. Welcome to the show. Are you on?
Thank you. This is exciting. I didn't think I'd be on.
Hey, you're on.
Hey.
What's up?
So I'm kind of nervous now. But okay. So I work for a B2B SaaS company. We run about $80,000 or so in search ads, Google only. But my main issue is that the marketing function is pretty new. They were more or less on autopilot. And I guess my main question is our contract sizes range from maybe $1,000 to $1,500 a year to say $500,000 a year. So I'm pretty new to marketing, so I'm not sure how to calculate my CAC or my ROAS.
Mhm.
How would you go about it?
So let me just make sure I understood you clearly. So your deal sizes can range from $1,000 to 500,000.
Yeah, a year. So we have two products, and that's why there's a disparity.
Do you have two separate? Is it product led on the low end and enterprise sales on the high end, or is it all going through a salesperson?
It's all going through sales. It's a small team, so that's why.
Got it. Okay. What on average, what's the deal size? Like if you averaged out all the customers that you got over a specific period of time, where does it end up?
I don't think there is, because we get a high volume of leads for the smaller size, and there's a lot of manual outreach that is involved for the bigger deals.
Got it. So Amazon search ads, if we're looking, are you talking specifically inside of that channel and trying to figure out how it's working, or broadly?
No, Google search ads. We're B2B SaaS.
Yeah. And so inside of the Google search ads, if someone clicks on your ad and then converts, you're going to have, if it's set up properly with a marketing automation system with UTMs like HubSpot or Pardot or anything, you're spending $80,000 a month on search ads. You better have that stuff in place, right? And so,
80 a year.
Oh, $80,000 a year. Oh, okay. That's a different story. And so you're going to have like UTM tracking. If you don't, then you should set that up immediately, because it's the only way that you're going to be able to connect it in the CRM and know whether or not these people are actually becoming customers. And then you can just look at all the people that filled out that form that came from Google search. You'll be able to filter that inside of your CRM. And then you'll be able to look at how many of those people progressed forward into a opportunity, and then to a qualified opportunity, and then to an actual customer. So you're going to have your people are going to fall off in each stage of that process. And then you can just calculate how much money did I spend total to get those people at the beginning. And then at each point, how many people fell off. So you just take total spend divided by the amount of people that got to that specific stage. So people will normally only measure it at cost per conversion. But when you actually get the good insights is when you look at it at cost per conversion, but also cost per SQO and customer acquisition cost. SQO is sales qualified opportunity, somewhere in the middle where your salesperson is probably given a demo, has an amount attached to it, and is continuing to execute a sales process. And you can calculate what the cost is for each of those things. And then we'll just look at the cost, because your question was rooted in CAC. I'll go there. And so let's say that you ran $80,000 in ads and you got 100 conversions. So that would be $800 per conversion. And then you got, out of those 100 conversions, you got, what's a realistic number here? Probably one customer from 100 is a realistic number if it's non-branded. And so you got one customer, it costs you 80 grand. And so your customer acquisition cost would be 80,000. The missing piece, especially with dynamic deal sizes, is, was that deal a $1,000 deal or a $500,000 deal? Because if it was a $500,000 deal, you could probably justify that ad spend for that to acquire that customer. If it was $1,000, it's a real failure in terms of CAC payback. And so that's the process to look at it. Set up the tracking, look inside of the CRM, figure out how the funnel looks with a defined time window of the initial conversion, and then just run the basic calculations on how much it costs you to get each step in the process, and then look at the total revenue generated divided by the spend.
Makes sense. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, Max, I'll bring you on next to ask your question.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Hey, hey.
All right, so quick question on basically when a competitor is in the news for some negative mentions, so how to kind of capitalize on that. So I'll just keep it broad. So cybersecurity company are one of our biggest competitors. They're in the news for two things. On the B2B side, it was like discovered that they have some trackers in their platform, and being a cybersecurity company, that's kind of like a big thing. They like justified it on a blog post, but still like people are talking about it. And then on the consumer side, it is going to be like they changed their freemium model where people got pissed off now of they basically rolled it back to a little bit less functionality in terms of where it goes out to. So that kind of plays into the consumer side, but also rolls into the brand, like the business side, because it's just like an overall look. So wanted to know what you think some good plays on that would be in terms of, we released like a blog saying we don't have that stuff on our platform. We have some like negative keyword like search ads going on there in terms of like competitor alternatives, all that stuff, and some just kind of like branded display ads saying like tired of X competitor, and then it just leads off to some other content.
So my general feeling on this, having done a couple things like this because our customers asked us to, which is fine, but my general feeling on this is to stay above the line, for a lack of a better way to say it, right? And so, and the thing that you really want, if you wanted to go back, is you wanted to be the top of mind brand for all of the people when they felt that pain, that they think about you first when they want to switch, right? And so I think there's a difference between being opportunistic, like some of the stuff that you just mentioned, and then just have executed properly to a place where at some point someone has a desire to change, and then you think about them first. I'll give you a very clear example. We use Asana as our project management tool, but Monday.com has been crushing it all over the place for a very long time, right? And we got to this is a long time ago now, but we got to a place where like there was one specific thing that Asana couldn't do, and I was getting frustrated about it. And the first thing I did was Monday.com didn't need to like send me an ad saying, hey, don't you wish this feature was here? I just went to Google and searched Monday.com, and then I evaluated it, and I decided that the cost of switching wasn't worth it to me. And so I went back, but that is what you want, right? The actual action where somebody's like, oh, we had a security breach, or we changed our freemium model where we dramatically increased our prices, and somebody just says, hey, like, I'm done with this company, I'm going to go buy this one. So that would be like the ideal setting. And now let's get more deep into your question, because I recognize that probably wasn't that helpful for you. So on the competitive search ads that have been running in general, like we tried one of these. There was a security breach from a major competitor of one of the companies that we work with. And so we attempted to specifically target security breach, right? Like blah, 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 security breach inside of Google search ads. The problem is that a majority of the people that were searching that were not actual users. It was like a large enterprise company. It was investors. There was PR around it. There was a lot of actual irrelevant people that were landing on those pages. And so that's one thing. If I was going to offer you something, that aligns with like kind of taking the high road, I wouldn't take any knocks on, are you tired of this competitor? Are you tired of this? I would just highlight the things that you do well that they've messed up on.
Yep.
And so that's sort of the angle, and not even necessarily needing to be like switch now or switch from blah, 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 but just, security breach. Hey, we just passed our like PR announcement. We passed 2 weeks ago, we passed our SOC 2 compliance, or I don't know this thing well enough to do it, but like that's an example of something that you could run to those to be sort of like opportunistic.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Is just not slinging mud, just elevating our brand versus like almost not even mentioning the other at all.
Yeah, people know, you know what I mean? Like, cool. Let me know how it goes.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Max. Good question. I have a question for Victoria. She is not in a position to come on, so I'm going to ask this on her behalf. She wants to know if you have any recommendations of where she can find SaaS metric benchmarks. she's not sure if the numbers she's looking at are good, bad, or ugly. Is there a particular source that you'd recommend?
Yeah, so my experience with benchmarks is that if you're executing the exact same strategy and you want to be average, then you should align to benchmarks, right? But what we find is that we don't execute the same strategy as other people, and so therefore we need to have our own benchmarks because they're very different. And so we have the easiest example is that people put out a ton of data. All marketing leads convert at less than 1%. And I'm like, over here, our customers win 7 or 8% of their leads. Like, I don't know is it the definition of the lead? Is it how we're doing marketing? I don't know. But over here, there's a huge difference based on your benchmark. I guess we're top performing, right? And so benchmarks can be very misleading depending on what you're looking for. But I agree, because I have a lot of different data points, I've been able to develop my own benchmarks, but you probably haven't had that experience. And so you want to know whether or not you're close to on track. And so my recommendation would be to, instead of finding a report, because those reports are typically published by somebody that has a vested interest in you knowing that metric, whether it's an analyst firm or a MarTech vendor or an agency or something like that, I would find somebody that you trust and just compare your data to theirs. And if you did that with 3 or 4 people that you trust, you would be able to start to qualitatively or quantitatively, I suppose, put together an average of what other people's metrics look like that you want to compare against. And that would be my recommendation on how to do it in a way that I feel would be actually more effective than looking at like some type of report.
Also measuring just progress of improvement over time with whatever you're doing too. Like if you're executing and moving things in the right direction, like comparing yourself to your past.
Yeah. And then it's super like I have my own benchmarks from other companies that sell the exact ACV at the same type of buyer with the same sales cycle length. Like I have an idea of what it should be, but every company is different. Right? We have one company that's in that situation that converts demo requests to SQLs at 90%. And we have another one that converts them at the exact same situation at 51%. And the difference is that one company has a different sales motion, and they have a couple of lead sources that we can't get rid of that drives a lot of unqualified buyers into their demo form. And so the conversion rate is lower. We can filter those out. We can look at them. And so it's half of it is about understanding how you need to slice the data to make the benchmarks equal. So you know that what you're comparing yourself to is actually the same.
I've got a good product-led growth question from our good friend, David.
Love this
Hi.
stuff. By the way, at first I have a PSA for anyone that's listening on here. We're looking to work with a product-led growth company. So if anyone is listening to this that wants to work with us, we have a couple working right now, but we would love another. I'm interested in working with another one. And so if you would, I think it would be really interesting, and it would actually probably be good for you too. So PSA is over. Go ahead, David.
Sure, thank you. So in the last 24 hours, I've spoken to 3 different organizations who are each talking about product-led growth. And these are all IT technology type companies selling to enterprises as their main kind of ideal customer.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always thought of product-led growth as something that's a bit more of a consumer-oriented type of technology, or something that's sold to more individuals rather than large ticket price items with longer sales cycles. So I kind of love to get your opinion on maybe what fits product-led growth neatly, and then potentially any thoughts you might have that might be slight variations for higher priced tech items. So it could work if you've got these scenarios, perhaps. So does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree that a lot of companies that initially adopted product-led growth were low-priced transactional single user products, not necessarily B2C. However, like companies like Asana, Slack, different things like that, that Zoom, that have $7 or $40 a month products. And when you sell that into an enterprise at a per user basis or a different value metric, they become 7-figure contracts. And so that's sort of a different way to look at it. Product led doesn't necessarily mean that it should be only transactional. Now, what's happening that I see in the market is that this is more based on what the consumer wants. And there's clear business data around the fact that if you start to adopt these things over time, if you are able to figure it out, your cost of acquisition goes down because you need way less sales resources. And so there's some business reasons to do it. There's also some user or buyer reasons to do it. And so what we're seeing right now is there are companies that I would consider they're mid-market prices, not super enterprise and not transactional, $50,000 a year deals, right? And they want to keep selling their $50,000 a year deals, but they want to figure out ways to get people inside of their product that become product qualified, that then they could go in. The first iteration would be they become product qualified somehow, and then you have a sales rep follow up. And then the final iteration would that you would actually move them all the way through to a paying user potentially, with little to no sales resources or friction, but the sales resources are always there to move that across. And it basically gives you a different way to fill the top of the funnel with people that are actually deep into the product. And so that's the thing that I see happening. It's different for a company that was built from product led from the beginning, right? But there's a lot of companies that are now hundreds of millions of dollars in recurring revenue and sell those types of deals and now want to introduce it, which creates a lot of organizational challenges in how to get that done efficiently. And I've talked about this because when companies do this, when you move to a product-led strategy, you're basically going to kill your pipeline for a specific period of time while people move into the product and not ask for a demo to talk to your sales rep. That's exactly what will happen. And so there's a crossing the chasm, for lack of a better way to say it. That period of time can be very painful for companies.
It's a bit difficult to maybe say this, but I'd be very curious if anyone's had like a step-by-step, do this, because you're absolutely right. If you're going to be killing off your current revenue process, your current go-to-market to try and switch gears and adopt another one, it does seem as if there's a bit of a risk there potentially. Yeah. Or you decide you're going to have both running at once and see how it kind of works out.
Inevitably, they'll both be running at once no matter what. Like I imagine, I can't speak for sure, but I imagine that Slack has an outbound sales team that does that. I imagine that happens, and then a majority comes through product led. And so they're going to be both running in parallel. But when you look at this from an actual marketing lens, like you have basically a single flow of leads that come through your website, hit your homepage, and then click on the main CTA. And in order to move to product led, you need to get a free trial or try now or get started as a either secondary CTA to get a demo or just getting rid of the get a demo. And no matter what, even if there's two CTAs side by side, get started for free, get a demo, 90% or more of users are going to click get started for free, and your marketing source pipeline is going to go down by at least 90%. And so that's the challenge from a marketing contribution standpoint, is that exact thing.
Cool. Thank you.
Great question as usual, David.
Yeah.
Oh, Andrew Wheeler, I think you asked the other question in advance. I'll bring you on. Yeah. You and Anna had a question, right?
Yes, Anna couldn't make it tonight. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So right now we're in a situation where we have two very similar Facebook ad campaigns that we're looking to begin. And the only difference is that one campaign has a special offer only available to lower income schools. So we looked into being able to target lower income zip codes on Facebook, but that's no longer available. Mm-hmm. And it seems like if we push this campaign on Facebook ads, we'll end up showing this offer to thousands of people who won't be able to use the offer, just wasting our funding for it.
Yep.
And we were wondering if you had any ideas for loop arounds or getting around that.
How much do you spend a month on Facebook?
On Facebook, we're just starting it now.
Okay, so not a meaningful
So
amount.
I think our funding is about $2,000 a month.
And you sell to schools?
Yes.
Okay.
Districts.
So given the constraints that you just laid out, the only way would be to use a different tool and build an account list and target those people. And at that point, given your spend, you might as well just do that on LinkedIn. And so that's an option. You could pull those accounts and you could try and build a list in LinkedIn and just do that in LinkedIn instead. Depending on your objectives and who you're targeting and different things like that, like the CPM differences can be very wide between LinkedIn and Facebook, or they can be not as dramatic as they used to be. And so it depends on the cost of your product and your funnel metrics and different stuff like that. But if that offer is really important for you to run and you can make the economics work, then you're going to have to do it a little bit differently. Instead of just using like school and then income level, you're going to have to actually pull the list of accounts. But if you had the list of accounts, I would just do that on LinkedIn.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to help.
Thanks, Andrew. Good to have you on the show. I just put a call out for some final questions for tonight, but we might be winding down.
Yeah, I'm cool. I'm cool with that. We this is considered, it's funny when this is considered a short episode and we've been going for 80 minutes. And so we're going to have a huge bash coming up here toward the end of the month for the year anniversary, which I'm pumped for. And so, yeah, we'll end a little bit early.
Actually, I have a video prospecting update for you, Chris.
Okay.
So I started my side hustle gig at SDR Nation last week as head of events. It just kind of fell into my lap, so it's a blessing in disguise, and I feel so grateful and fortunate. But it's so funny looking back of how everything transpired, like you pressuring me in a way to get started with video prospecting and putting myself out there and getting to practice in, like that was super beneficial, because what I had to do during my first day was record this like 30-second intro of telling everyone who I am, where I'm from, and what my position is. And of course, due to nervousness, I overthought it, and it took like 30 tries. and then I posted it. I was like, this is good enough, and then go. But then I kept deleting all the previous takes that I did. And I was like, wait, take number 11 was the perfect one. And I deleted it. So it just goes back to like, don't overthink it. Just do it and post it.
We only do one take around here.
Yeah.
So, but it's a great story, right? And it takes practice. The first time that I filmed like a video podcast was in 2017. And I didn't know anything about what I was doing. I was interviewing physicians. I was not a good host. We didn't have good things. Our mics weren't good. And I didn't really even know what I was saying. And I didn't feel comfortable with a camera, or let alone like people listening to me. Like it takes time, but life is long, and building these skills is helpful. You know what I mean? And so in order to do anything that's new, you'll go through a period where it feels uncomfortable, and the discomfort is actually a good sign.
Oh yes, I know. Last week was like drinking from a fire hose, and I was like, wait, what did I get myself into? And then this week is like so much better. I'm like, okay, those are just like severe growing pains for the first week, but I'm better now. And it's funny, I'll have to be shooting a lot more videos, so I'm really glad I got to practice in through Demand Gen Live. So thank you for that.
Nice. Thrilled to help, and thank you for sharing the story. Cool, everyone.
Chris, let's squeeze in one more. John has something. Let's do it. You
can't even end early here, but for John, for you, anything.
Exactly. John, let me let me bring you on, and then this will be where we end.
Well, you guys are very gracious. Thanks. I'm sure you're just being kind because of the plug today, but it was very sincere. I ran into something. I'm trying to think of something in the background. So I'm going to search looking for something interesting to do, and very rarely do I find a decent tech company down here in my area that has anything interesting, and I found one. And they've got kind of a difficult problem, and I'm just doing the research at this point, but I really don't have a great solution for part of their issue. And with the two companies, you know, the 800-pound gorilla in the space is DocuSign. The little teeny number 2 in the space is PandaDoc. And they're trying to find a way to build a stronger partner and alliance program. One of the challenges they've got as a guy who's run B2B SaaS sales organizations, you know, do I really care what I'm going to use to do the document management, the proposal management, get people to sign? Give me something that's reliable, secure, inexpensive. I'm in, next. And, you know, they've got Microsoft's an investor, HubSpot's an investor. You know, they do have a decent beginning, but, you know, Salesforce owns 85% of the marketplace, and they don't really care. So I wanted to put it out to you. If you think about a sales strategy, a partner strategy, strategic alliances, and by the way, I'm interested in anybody in the audience, if you want to hit me offline, I'd love any creative ideas, because it's, you know, it's a very difficult problem when they've got a very good product, but they kind of started at the low end of the market with a freemium offering and of trying to move up. And, you know, DocuSign did $1 billion. I mean, just under $1 billion. So we're talking about 900 million versus about a $40 million company. I mean, there's a big difference here. And so I'm trying to come up with something interesting, innovative, unique that they might want to think about. And it's a little off topic of what we normally do, but I thought—
No, this is great. This is great. So first off, this is, at least for me, I actually imagine it's for you too. You mentioned like you're not really sure what to do. Like, I love the projects where I don't exactly know what to do. It's what makes it interesting, right? Like, I work with specific customers where I know that there will be new challenges that I don't know how to solve, which then drives innovation for the rest of our company, right? And so I think that's a good thing. I seek those things out. Now, moving to your question, the root of this one, I believe to be like relatively fundamental. If I took a step back, and then I'll get deeper into your question, but if I take a step back, the root is, you mentioned it and I feel it, right? Like, we use PandaDoc, but whatever, you know what I mean? Like, that you need a differentiator and a segmentation model in order to win. Right. And so just being a commodity against a large, I feel like I've said this exact same thing to Ashley before, just being a commodity player with a huge competitor in the space is a recipe to lose. Right. And so no matter what your sales strategy is, or no matter what these things are, all roads lead to never overtaking that company without like core innovation. Right.
Competitive differentiation. Absolutely.
And so that would be my number one answer. But then moving deeper, I'm not sure I have enough details to like help you specifically on a partner strategy or something like that. But I'll give you one example. Right. You mentioned HubSpot. And I don't know the full story here. There's some speculation. Please, nobody at HubSpot like call me out for speculating some of this stuff wrong. But it's speculation, so I'll just go with it and pretend that it's the truth for right now. But I like the caveat. So several years ago, HubSpot and Wistia were like best friends. And so for those that don't know, Wistia makes a video like management platform, and they're both based in Boston, and they were both startups. And the Wistia and HubSpot integration was really cool. And then I would imagine that at some point HubSpot tried to buy Wistia, and Wistia said no. I do not know this to be true, but this is just an assumption. And then what HubSpot did is they made a core integration, like a core part of their product with Vidyard. And so one strategy that you could take is to try and be one of the core products in one of those tools, like being the proposal management software for a core CRM would be a great partner strategy. It's just I think it would be really challenging, but that would be like a creative recommendation to think about. But like a lot of those CRMs have their own tool around that already. So you'd have to like think, but that would be one recommendation as like it's not necessarily, maybe it's a partner strategy. I'm not exactly, maybe it's a technology strategy. I'm not exactly sure, but it's the first thing that pops into my mind.
So beat this one up. One of the ones I was thinking is along the same lines, a company like this, it's very unlikely you're going to be $1 billion company. So usually you want to get to be about 150, 200 million, and then you become essentially a tuck-in acquisition to a HubSpot, a Microsoft, some other platform that needs that.
Mm-hmm.
And one other platform, if you think about like a GoDaddy or some of the other big web domain controllers, when you first start a business, what do? You go out and look for a domain name.
Mm-hmm.
And, early on in the business, you need something to manage your contracts and your proposals. And so I thought that might be one interesting play along the same lines of what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. The challenge is, at what point do you actually need it, right? Like we were probably like 9 months into business before we had a proposal software that wasn't like Adobe Sign, you know what I mean? That was like that was like legit, you know what I mean? And so the point, it's not like you form an LLC and then you buy proposal software. That's not exactly how it works. And so the delta between the time where you form a company, you'd have to find the exact trigger and the provider of the trigger at that exact time, which the most logical thing I could think of was CRM, but there's probably other ones out there that I'm not thinking about right now. But it's about identifying the trigger and then who's the partner that's part of the process during when that trigger happens.
Good point.
Cool. Hope it was helpful. I'm glad you slid that one in here.
Yeah,
it was. I appreciate it. It's I was thinking the freemium model as an additional free add-on for the web domain provider to just throw it in their package just to try and get usage. They wouldn't have a paid version for a year. But to your point, but yeah, it was useful.
Yeah, and I would venture that less than 1% of people, it was probably even less than that buy a GoDaddy domain have a sales team and have a need for that software. It's probably a very small percentage.
It's probably a good point. Thanks.
check out the chat. Kai had a suggestion for payment processors.
Nice. I like that.
That's a good one. Thanks, Kai.
Yeah. Look at the ideas flowing over here. This is great stuff. Right. So episode, whatever number we're on, is now in the books. Appreciate all of you coming here. We had a request, and so I want to do a poll about whether or not we'll do this next week. I think it'd be useful, but I want you all to participate in whether or not we do it. And so there was a request, I think a long time ago, some of you might've been on here. We did a demand SaaS teardown where we looked at, you can get a lot of public information, what ads they're running, what's look at SEMrush, look at like basically the whole process that I would go through and evaluate what they're doing, and then give feedback or thoughts about it. And you actually see how I look through it. If people want to do that, just give me a thumbs up and we'll put that on the agenda for next week. Overwhelming yes. Okay, it's on for next week. It usually is about a 15 to 20 minute segment. And we'll do it. Sounds great. So everyone looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to it, and hope you have a great rest of your week. Love having you all here and can't wait to see you again soon.
Bye, everyone. See you next Tuesday.
Bye.